My son introduced another man as his dad while I was sitting in the front row. The first time I saw my son in 15 years, he thanked another man for being his father, and the worst part was he wasn't wrong. For nearly 2 weeks, I argued with myself about whether I should even go to his graduation. Every morning I decided I would. Every evening I found another excuse to stay home. I'd already missed 15 birthdays. Every Christmas, every school play, every scraped knee, every report card, every victory and every failure. Showing up now felt less like love and more like trespassing. 3 different times I filled out the guest registration online. 3 different times I closed my laptop before pressing submit. Then, 3 days before the ceremony, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. There was no return address, only my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years but recognized instantly. Sarah. My wife had been gone for 6 months. Inside was a graduation invitation from Ashton Law School. Beneath the printed text were 4 handwritten words. I hope you come. I stared at them until they blurred. Sarah always planned ahead. She bought Christmas presents months early, mailed birthday cards before anyone else even remembered the date, and labeled everything with neat little notes. She must have written those words long before cancer took away the strength in her hands. She knew graduation was coming. She knew she wouldn't be there. But somehow she still made sure I would. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting at my kitchen table with the invitation in front of me. Every excuse I'd repeated for 15 years suddenly sounded weak. He probably doesn't want to see you. Maybe. You'll only make things worse. Maybe. It's too late. That was the lie I'd believed for so long it had started sounding like the truth. The morning of the ceremony, I stood in front of my closet longer than I wanted to admit. Retirement changes a man. You stop wearing suits. You stop polishing shoes. Eventually, you stop looking in mirrors, because the stranger staring back reminds you of every year you've wasted. I chose the navy blue suit Sarah had always liked. Whenever I wore it, she'd smile and say, "You already have the detective face. Don't dress like you're about to arrest somebody." I caught myself smiling. It hurt how clearly I could still hear her voice. The drive to the university took almost 2 hours. Twice I almost turned the car around. During 28 years as a police detective, I'd walked into armed robberies, domestic disputes, and abandoned warehouses where nobody knew what waited inside. I'd never been as afraid as I was pulling into that parking lot. Because criminals couldn't break my heart. My own son could. The campus buzzed with excitement. Graduates hurried across the sidewalks in black gowns. Parents carried flowers. Grandparents struggled to take photographs while children ran between them laughing. Families. Everywhere I looked, families. I couldn't stop wondering how many family photos existed with Noah in them, and how many included me. The answer was probably none. An usher scanned my invitation and smiled. "Welcome, Mr. Carter. You're in the front row." Front row. Life has an incredible sense of irony. The father who had missed nearly every important day of his son's life was now sitting closer to the stage than anyone else. I found my seat beside an elderly couple. "Our grandson is friends with Noah," the woman beside me said proudly. "He's such a wonderful young man." "So I've heard." She smiled. "You know him?" I hesitated. "I'm his father." Her face brightened. "Oh, you must be so proud." The words caught in my throat. "I am." That part at least was true. The lights dimmed, and the music began. Graduates entered in pairs while families applauded. I spotted Noah immediately, not because I'd watched him grow into a man. I hadn't. I recognized him because he still walked the same way he had at 12 years old, with his left foot turning slightly outward every few steps. Sarah used to tease him that he'd wear out one shoe before the other. He was taller now, broader, confident. The little boy I'd left behind had become someone I would have been proud to know even if he weren't my son. Then Noah looked toward the audience. Our eyes met, just for a second, long enough for both of us to recognize each other. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He simply looked at me, then turned back toward the stage. That somehow hurt more than anger would have. The ceremony continued, but I barely heard a word. My mind kept drifting back to the last morning I'd seen him. He'd been standing in the driveway, holding a baseball glove almost too big for his hands. "When are you coming home?" he'd asked. "Soon." I'd believed it. At least I think I had. I never imagined that one word could stretch into 15 years. Eventually, the dean returned to the podium. Our valedictorian. The audience erupted into applause. Noah Carter. My son walked across the stage with a confidence I'd never possessed at his age. He thanked his professors, his classmates, and then his mother. When he spoke about Sarah, his voice faltered for only a moment before he continued. I wouldn't be standing here today without the man who raised me. Something inside me sank. Noah turned toward the audience. Not toward me, toward a man sitting a few rows behind. He had silver hair, kind eyes, and wore an old brown jacket that looked comfortably familiar. He stood as Noah smiled at him. I'd like everyone to meet my dad. The audience applauded. Some people even stood. Noah walked down from the stage just long enough to hug him. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't formal. It was the effortless embrace of two people who had shared years of ordinary life together. And in that moment, I understood something I should have accepted long ago. Someone had been there when Noah learned to drive. Someone had sat through parent-teacher meetings. Someone had celebrated birthdays, fixed broken furniture, listened after heartbreaks, and stood beside Sarah while she fought cancer. Someone had earned that hug. It wasn't me. When Noah returned to the microphone, he scanned the audience once more. This time, he looked directly at me. There is one more person I'd like to thank. The room fell quiet. He held my gaze. Thank you. A brief pause for coming today. No dad. No father. Just, thank you for coming. I couldn't stay any longer. I quietly stood and walked toward the exit before the applause ended. Maybe leaving without making a scene was the kindest thing I could still do. I had almost reached the doors when I heard footsteps behind me. Michael. I stopped. Slowly, I turned around. The man Noah had just introduced as his father stood only a few feet away. He held out his hand. My name is David, he said with a calm smile. I've been hoping we'd finally meet. For a second, I couldn't move. I had spent 15 years imagining the man who had raised my son. In every version of the story inside my head, he had been the reason my family disappeared. It was easier to blame someone I had never met than admit the truth. No one had stolen my place. I'd left it empty. Finally, I took his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, not the handshake of a winner. The handshake of someone who understood exactly how difficult this moment was. I'm glad you came, he said. I don't think Noah is. David glanced toward the auditorium, where families were beginning to spill into the hall. You'd be surprised. I saw his face. So did I. He smiled. Faintly. I also saw the way he looked for you before he walked onto that stage. That caught me off guard. He knew I was here. He spotted you immediately. I didn't know what to say. David nodded toward the doors. Would you mind walking with me? It's quieter outside. I almost refused. Instead, I followed him. We crossed the courtyard in silence. Graduates were posing for photographs, parents were wiping away tears, and children chased each other across the lawn. It was impossible not to notice how ordinary happiness looked. David stopped beneath a large oak tree overlooking the gardens. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. I've rehearsed this conversation for months. You expected me to come. No, he smiled. I hoped. I looked across the lawn until I found Noah. He was surrounded by classmates, laughing as cameras flashed around him. He looked happy. For years I'd wondered whether my absence had ruined his life. Looking at him now, I realized something that hurt almost as much. He had built a good one without me. David followed my gaze. He has your smile. I almost disagreed. Then Noah laughed. For just a second, the left corner of his mouth lifted before the right. Exactly like mine. You raised a good man, I said quietly. David shook his head. I helped. You did more than that. I never tried to replace you. His answer came so quickly that I knew he'd been waiting to say it. The first time I met Noah, he was 14, 2 years after I'd left. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not my dad." What did you tell him? I said, I know. That was it? What else could I say? He shrugged. He already had a father. The words landed harder than I expected. I just happened to be the man who was there. For the first time that afternoon, I looked at him without seeing a rival. I saw a teacher, a husband, a man who had stepped into a broken family and tried to make sure a little boy still had someone cheering from the sidelines. Nothing more, nothing less. Then why did Noah call you dad today? David didn't answer. Instead, he reached inside his jacket and pulled out a small silver USB drive. It was scratched and worn from years of sitting in a drawer. He placed it in my hand. This. His voice softened. This is why Sarah wanted you here. I frowned. I don't understand. After she passed away, I cleaned out the attic. A knot formed in my stomach. There was one box she never let anyone touch. His eyes met mine. When I opened it, I found 15 birthday videos. Everything around me disappeared. Every birthday after leaving home, I'd borrowed a camera, sat alone in my apartment, and recorded a message for Noah. I always believed I'd give them to him one day. After I got sober, after the nightmares stopped, after I became the father he deserved. That day never came. I never sent them. I know. How? Because Sarah found them. I stared at him. She knew? For almost 10 years. I felt the air leave my lungs. Why didn't she tell me? Because she made you a promise. The memory came back instantly. The last night Sarah and I had spent together. I had been drinking, barely sleeping, terrified of the man I'd become after Ethan died. I remembered holding both her hands. If I ever try to come home before I'm better, stop me, she had promised. And somehow, even after everything, she'd kept that promise. She never stopped believing you'd come back, David said. I did. He looked at me for a long moment. No, you stopped believing you deserved to. I couldn't argue. Every year I'd stayed away had made returning feel impossible. How do you explain missing 5 birthdays? Then 10, then 15. At some point, shame became easier than hope. David reached into his pocket again. This time, he unfolded a letter. The doctors told Sarah she didn't have long. He handed it to me carefully. She wrote this a week before she died. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the page. The first line made me smile through the tears. Dear David, if you're reading this, then I finally forgot to tell you where I hid the attic key. That was Sarah. Even at the end, she couldn't resist making someone smile. Then the letter changed. If Michael ever comes back, don't let Noah choose between the two of you. Love isn't a competition. You never replaced Michael. Michael was never replaced by you. You simply loved my boys during different chapters of their lives. I stopped reading. The words blurred. After a moment, I forced myself to continue. Noah will probably be angry. Michael will definitely be ashamed. Please remind both of them that families don't fall apart because life becomes difficult. They fall apart when people stop trying. Thank you for loving my boys. I folded the letter slowly. I didn't deserve her. David smiled sadly. I've spent years thinking the same thing. For the first time, I noticed the worn cuffs on his jacket, the scratches on his wedding ring, the repaired frame of his glasses. He wasn't extraordinary. He was simply a good man. Were you ever angry with me? I asked. At first. He nodded. I couldn't understand how any father could leave. And now? His eyes drifted toward the USB drive still resting in my hand. After Sarah died. He paused. Noah watched every one of those birthday videos. My heart pounded. All 15. In one weekend. I couldn't imagine what that must have felt like. Watching 15 years of my life in less than 2 days. Watching hope slowly disappear from my face. David looked at me. When he finished, he hesitated. He cried for almost an hour. Before I could ask what happened next, a familiar voice spoke behind us. I wasn't crying because he left. I turned around. Noah was standing only a few feet away. I was crying because I finally understood why. I turned so quickly that Sarah's letter slipped from my hand. Noah bent down, picked it up, and carefully folded it before handing it back to me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He had Sarah's eyes. I hadn't noticed it during the ceremony. Maybe because I'd been looking for pieces of myself. Standing only a few feet away, I finally saw her in him too. David looked between us. I'll give you some privacy. You don't have to, Noah said. I think I do. He squeezed Noah's shoulder, nodded politely to me, and walked toward the parking lot, stopping far enough away that he couldn't hear us but close enough that we both knew he hadn't really left. I watched him go. He's a good man, I said. He is. I'm glad you had him. Noah looked at me for a second. So am I. There wasn't a hint of guilt in his voice. There shouldn't have been. He hadn't betrayed me by loving the man who had been there. I'd betrayed him by making someone else necessary. I watched all the videos. He said. I heard. I wasn't planning to. He gave a small smile. I watched the first one because I was curious. And then, I couldn't stop. He looked toward the graduation building. I stayed up until almost 5 in the morning. I laughed quietly. You always hated staying up late. I still do. So why didn't you stop? Because every time one ended. He looked back at me. I wanted to know if next year would finally be the year you came home. The words hit harder than I expected. But you never did. I lowered my eyes. No. He took a slow breath. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you keep recording them? I looked down at the USB drive resting in my palm. The first one was easy. He waited. I truly believed I'd be back before your next birthday. He nodded. So I talked to you like it was only temporary. And the second? I still believed it. The third? I was embarrassed. The fifth? I didn't know how to explain 5 years. The 10th? I closed my eyes. I didn't know how to explain 10. Silence settled between us. I kept telling myself I'd send them all together. When? When I became someone you could be proud of. Noah studied my face for a long moment. Do you know what I noticed? What? Oh, you changed. I got older. No. He shook his head. You got quieter. I frowned. In the first few videos you smiled all the time. He gave a sad laugh. You talked about teaching me to drive. I remember. You talked about baseball. The fishing trip I promised. The tree house you wanted to rebuild. I smiled weakly. I remember all of it. But then, his voice became softer. You stopped talking about the future. I felt my chest tighten. You stopped saying when I come home. He swallowed. You started saying. His eyes met mine. If we ever meet again. I couldn't look at him anymore. Because he was right. I hadn't even realized it was happening. Hope hadn't disappeared overnight. It had faded one birthday at a time. I cried during the last video. Noah admitted, I know. No, he shook his head. You don't. I looked up. I wasn't crying because you left. His voice cracked. I was crying because I could actually see the moment you stopped believing I'd still want you back. A tear rolled down my cheek. I never stopped loving you. I know. You do? I never doubted that. Those words shattered something inside me. I doubted whether you still loved yourself. I covered my face with one hand. I didn't. I figured. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. The edges were worn. Several pages were folded. You took notes. He looked embarrassed. I'm in law school. He shrugged. I write everything down. Despite everything, I laughed. You really are my son. I counted something. What? You apologized. I smiled sadly. Probably too much. 132 times. I blinked. You counted. I got curious. He smiled. I also noticed something else. What? The word sorry disappeared near the end. I frowned. It did? You stopped apologizing. Why? Because by then, he closed the notebook. You didn't think an apology would matter anymore. I searched my memory. He was right. The last few videos were shorter, quieter. Sometimes I'd simply wish him a happy birthday and stare into the camera for a few seconds before turning it off. There were days when I couldn't even pretend I deserved forgiveness. I wish I'd been braver. Noah nodded slowly. So do I. Neither of us spoke for a while. The laughter from the graduation lawn drifted across the campus, reminding us that life was continuing around us. Finally, Noah broke the silence. There's one thing I've never understood. I looked at him. When you left, he paused. Did you think I was better off without you? The truth tasted bitter. Yes. Why? Because I wasn't the man you deserved. No. He shook his head. You weren't the man you wanted to be. I stared at him. There's a difference. He took one slow step closer. I didn't need a perfect father. His eyes filled with tears. I just needed mine. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he deserved better. A father who never left. A father who remembered every birthday without needing a camera. A father who stood in the front row because he'd always been there. Not because an invitation arrived 15 years too late. But none of those words came out. Instead, I asked the question that had haunted me since I saw him walk across that stage. Were you angry with me? He didn't answer immediately. At first, he nodded. I hated you. The honesty hurt. It was supposed to. I was 12, he continued. I didn't understand PTSD. I didn't understand guilt. I didn't know what happened to Officer Collins. He looked down at the notebook still resting in his hand. I only knew my dad had left. I nodded. You had every right. I remember waiting by the living room window every Friday. My chest tightened. Mom never told me you were coming. He smiled sadly. I knew that. Then why did you wait? Because kids believe impossible things. His voice was calm, almost thoughtful. I thought maybe you'd surprise me. I closed my eyes. I even packed a backpack once. I looked up. What? I figured if you showed up, we'd leave together. I couldn't breathe. I put my baseball glove in first, the same glove I'd seen in the driveway the morning I left. I sat by the window until it got dark. He laughed quietly, but there was no joy in it. Mom made hot chocolate that night. Did she tell you I wasn't coming? No. He shook his head. She just sat beside me. I could picture it perfectly. Sarah never lied when the truth would eventually find you. What happened after that? I stopped waiting every Friday. He paused. Then I stopped waiting altogether. The words settled heavily between us. I told myself I didn't care. But you did. I always did. A breeze moved through the trees above us. Graduates and families continued walking across the campus, unaware that 15 years of silence were slowly disappearing beneath the shade of an old oak. I need you to know something, I said. He looked at me. I never started another family. His expression didn't change. I never had another child. I know. I never wanted another life. I know. You knew. He nodded. Mom told me. What did she say? That some people leave because they stop loving their family. He smiled faintly. And some people leave because they believe their family deserves someone better. Sarah. Even after everything, she had protected me without making excuses for me. I used to get angry when she defended you, Noah admitted. I'd tell her she was making excuses. And what would she say? He laughed softly. Understanding someone isn't the same as excusing them. I smiled through my tears. That sounded exactly like her. Noah opened his notebook again. I actually wrote down questions while I watched the videos. How many? He flipped through the pages. 37. I couldn't help smiling. You really are becoming a lawyer. I guess. He looked at one page before closing it again. I don't need most of them anymore. What changed? I finally met the person behind the videos. Those words stayed with me. For 15 years, he'd only known me as memories, old photographs and birthday recordings. Today, I had become real again. There is one question I still have. Ask. Did you ever try to come back? The answer came immediately. Twice. He frowned. Twice? The first time was about 3 years after I left. I looked toward the parking lot. I drove all the way to your street. You did? I parked around the corner. He stared at me. I watched you riding your bike. A lump formed in my throat. You fell. He smiled in surprise. I remember that. You got back up before your mother reached you. I laughed quietly. You looked so happy. So why didn't you come over? Because I saw you laughing. He looked confused. I swallowed hard. I thought maybe you didn't need me anymore. He shook his head slowly. I was 12. I know. I always needed you. The shame hit me harder than ever. And the second time, the week before your high school graduation. His eyebrows lifted. You came? I sat outside the school. For how long? Almost 2 hours. What happened? I saw sadly. She looked tired. Cancer had probably already begun stealing her strength. I realized she was carrying enough already. So you left. I convinced myself showing up would only make everything harder. Noah let out a long breath. You know what the worst part is? What? You kept making decisions for me. I looked down. You decided when I should lose my father. His voice remained calm. You decided when I should stop hoping. Another pause. You decided when it was too late to come back. He wasn't accusing me. He was simply telling me the truth. And the truth hurt because it was deserved. I was wrong. Yes. I stole those choices from you. Yes. For the first time all afternoon he stepped forward until only a few inches separated us. But you're here now. I looked into his eyes. I can't change 15 years. No, but I don't want to lose another 15. Before I could answer, we heard footsteps approaching across the grass. David smiled as he reached us. I hate interrupting. He looked from Noah to me. But I think your mother would be very upset if the 3 of us left today, without having lunch together. None of us were hungry. We went anyway. There was a small diner just across from the university, crowded with families celebrating graduation. Every table seemed to have balloons, flowers, or proud parents talking over one another. The hostess asked, "Table for 3?" Noah smiled. Yeah, just one word. But hearing him naturally include me without hesitation felt bigger than he probably realized. We sat in a booth near the window. For the first few minutes, we hid behind menus we barely read. Finally, David broke the silence. I've known Noah for 13 years. He said I've never seen him nervous. I'm not nervous, Noah replied. David grinned. You folded that napkin into a square 4 times. Noah looked down and laughed. I guess I am. The tension eased. For the first time that day, the conversation didn't feel impossible. It felt human. A waitress took our order and disappeared. Noah leaned back in his seat. You know what always confused me growing up? I shook my head. Mom never let me hate you. The words surprised me. I tried. He smiled faintly. When I was 14, I told her I didn't have a father anymore. What did she say? She said, that's not true. He looked out the window for a moment before continuing. You have a father who's lost. That isn't the same thing. I closed my eyes. Even after everything I'd done, Sarah had protected the part of me worth remembering. I asked her why she still defended you. And she said something I've never forgotten. He looked back at me. Some people leave because they stop loving their family. A small pause. Others leave because they stop believing they're worthy of their family's love. I felt tears building again. I don't know how she kept believing in me. David answered before Noah could. Because she knew you. I looked at him. She never pretended what you did was okay. He spoke carefully. But she also refused to let one terrible chapter become your entire story. The food arrived. None of us touched it immediately. David picked up his glass. Can I admit something? Of course, Noah said. There were times I was jealous of Michael. I looked at him in surprise. You were? He nodded. Not because of who you were. He smiled at Noah. Because no matter how much time passed, this kid still wondered what his dad would think. Noah looked embarrassed. I wasn't that obvious. You absolutely were. David chuckled. You'd win a debate competition and say, I wonder if Dad would have liked that. You never told me. It wasn't my story to tell. He turned to me. I knew if you ever came back, he deserved to tell you himself. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For years, I'd imagined the man who raised my son as someone who wanted to erase me. Instead, he'd spent 13 years protecting a place for me that I hadn't earned. I owe you more than I can ever repay, I said quietly. David shook his head. No. You raised my son. I loved him. He smiled warmly. There's a difference. Noah laughed. You two really need to stop thanking each other. We all smiled. It felt strange, not forced, just comfortable. After lunch, we walked slowly back toward the parking lot. Graduates were leaving one by one, carrying flowers and diplomas. The campus was becoming quiet again. Noah stopped beside a bench. I've been thinking. That's dangerous, David joked. It usually is. Noah laughed before turning serious again. I don't expect us to suddenly act like nothing happened. I wouldn't ask that, I said. You missed too much. I know. You can't become 15 years of memories in one afternoon. I know. He took a deep breath. But hope flickered inside me. You can become part of what's next. I looked at him without speaking. I'm closing on a house next weekend. He smiled. It has a backyard that's basically just dirt. David nodded knowingly. He wants to build a deck. I've watched about 50 videos, Noah admitted. I still have no idea what I'm doing. I smiled. I've built exactly one deck. Was it any good? It leaned slightly to the left. Noah laughed. So, you'll fit right in. He looked between David and me. I was wondering. He hesitated just long enough for my heart to start racing. If both of you would help me build it. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Both of us? He nodded. I've spent enough years feeling like I had to choose. He looked at David. I won't do that anymore. Then he looked at me. I have 2 men who love me. His voice softened. In different ways, he smiled. And I think Mom would tell us that's more than enough. None of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. Noah reached into his graduation gown pocket and pulled out a small brass key. The attic. He placed it in my hand. I think it belongs to you now. I stared at the worn key. The same box that had held 15 years of regret now felt like the beginning of something else. Not the past, the future. As we reached our cars, Noah unlocked his. Before getting inside, he looked back at me. I'll text you the address. I smiled. I'll be there. He nodded. I know. For the first time in 15 years, someone I loved expected me to come back. The next Saturday, I arrived 30 minutes early. Old habits. When you've spent almost 3 decades as a detective, you either show up early or you show up apologizing. Noah's new house sat at the end of a quiet street with a backyard that was little more than grass, dirt, and a pile of lumber. He walked outside carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you'd be early." I smiled. "I figured you knew that." He handed me a cup. Neither of us mentioned the 15 years between us. For once, we didn't need to. A few minutes later, an old pickup truck pulled into the driveway. David climbed out wearing work gloves and carrying a toolbox that looked older than both of us. "Morning, gentlemen. You know how to build a deck?" Noah asked. David laughed. "I know how to confidently make mistakes." "Perfect," I said. "That makes 3 of us." For the next several hours, we measured boards, checked instructions, argued over which screw belonged where, and discovered that online tutorials always made everything look much easier than it actually was. At one point, Noah stepped back, looked at our work and frowned. "I think it's crooked." David pulled out a level. "It definitely is." We stared at it for a few seconds. Then all 3 of us burst out laughing. It wasn't the kind of laughter people force to be polite. It was effortless. The kind that sneaks up on you before you realize you've been happy for several minutes. Around lunchtime, we sat on upside-down buckets eating pizza from the box. Noah looked at us and shook his head. "You know what's funny?" "What?" David asked. "This is exactly how Mom imagined today." Both of us looked at him. "After she got sick," he continued, "she used to tell me something." He smiled to himself. "One day you'll have 2 stubborn old men trying to help you build something." David laughed. "She really said that?" "Almost exactly." He pointed at the crooked frame behind us. "She probably didn't think it'd be this crooked." I looked toward the unfinished deck. "Your mother always had more faith in us than we deserved." "She did," Noah said quietly. None of us spoke for a moment. We didn't need to. Sarah had somehow become part of the conversation without making the day feel sad. It felt like she was still encouraging all 3 of us to keep going. After lunch, we finished the last few boards. It wasn't perfect. One corner sat slightly higher than the others. David noticed first. "We can redo it." Noah walked onto the deck and bounced lightly. "It doesn't move." "It doesn't. It holds." He smiled. "Then it's good enough." I looked at him. "When did you become smarter than me?" He grinned. "I had good teachers." He looked at David, then at me. Both of us understood exactly what he meant. As we packed away the tools, Noah disappeared into the garage. A minute later, he returned carrying an old leather baseball glove. I recognized it immediately. The glove he'd been holding the morning I left. "I found this while unpacking." He tossed it toward me. I caught it without thinking. The leather was cracked with age, but it still fit my hand. "You still kept it?" He shrugged. "I never really wanted to throw it away." He walked a few steps into the yard and picked up a baseball from a cardboard box. "You think you've still got it, old man?" I laughed. "I guess we're about to find out." He threw the first ball gently. I caught it. Then I threw it back. The distance between us wasn't very far, maybe 30 feet. But somehow it felt like we were throwing the ball across 15 years. Throw after throw, the movement became easier, natural, familiar. Like our hands remembered something our lives had forgotten. David watched from the deck with his arms folded. "You know," he called out, "I've lived with him for 13 years. Yeah? I've never beaten him at catch." Noah laughed. "That's because you throw like a history teacher." David pointed a finger at him. "I'll pretend that wasn't an insult." We stayed outside until the evening sun began to disappear behind the houses. Eventually, Noah picked up his phone. We forgot something. "What?" "A picture." He set the timer and hurried back between us. Without thinking, he stood in the middle. David on one side, me on the other. The phone counted down. 3, 2, 1. The camera clicked. For a second, none of us moved. Then Noah looked at the picture and smiled. "I think Mom would have liked this one." "I think she would have," David said. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely. As I walked toward my car, Noah called after me. "Hey." I turned around. He smiled the same smile I'd seen across the graduation stage a week earlier. Only this time there was no hesitation. "Drive safe, Dad." I felt tears filling my eyes. This time I didn't hide them. "I will." I got into my car and looked once more in the rearview mirror. The 2 of them were still standing in the driveway, talking about whether the deck needed another support beam. I realized then that I'd spent 15 years believing David had taken my place. He never had. He had simply stood beside an empty space until I was finally ready to come back. Some stories end with forgiveness. Ours didn't. Ours began with it. Because families aren't rebuilt through grand speeches or perfect endings. They're rebuilt one ordinary Saturday at a time. And for the first time in 15 years, I wasn't driving away from my son. I was already looking forward to driving back.